Good morning, everyone, and welcome to What Is It Wednesday from the Barnes Museum in Southington, Connecticut. I'm very excited to bring you today's episode because we're going to do a little bit of hands-on history today. We're going to be recreating one of Sylvia Bradley's recipes that she would have cooked in the later part of the 1800s. It's called a loaf cake, and we have all the ingredients here. We'll be showing you how to do that, and then you can recreate it at home with the recipe. Before we do that, I'd like to show you the kitchens of the Barnes Museum. The kitchens were the heart of this home. There was always cooking going on. If you haven't joined us for our earlier episodes, let me give you a little recap. This house was built in 1836, and in 1836 it was only 6 rooms. 6 rooms on the inside of the house, but then on the outside of the house there was a summer kitchen, a kitchen that they did all of their cooking in throughout the early years that they lived at the homestead. In the later history of the house, there was an inside kitchen, and I'm going to show you that now. Let me flip this around. Here we are in the main kitchen that we have of the Barnes Museum. Now, you might think, I just said this house was built in 1836, and this is a very modern kitchen if you're thinking about the house in that respect. We have yellow countertops, we have glittery ceilings, we have linoleum floors. This kitchen was the last room of the house to be remodeled. This was remodeled around 1950, just before Leela, the last woman of the house, passed away. She said, "Hey Bradley, I'd like a new kitchen," and he said, "Sure, honey, not a problem." So he got her the state-of-the-art of everything, including this stove right here. This is a Glenwood range, and it was purchased in 1950. This range is spectacular. This can be cooked with 3 different types of fuel. It can be set up to work with wood, gas, or coal. Very unique stove. We also have a 1942 GE refrigerator over here, and we're going to go a little closer. People love to see the refrigerator during the tour because it still works. It still works. This is non-alcoholic beverages in here that we have. It's sparkling cider, by the way. But we have this wonderful refrigerator that still works. And everyone thinks that the freezer is on the bottom, but those are the mechanics, the working parts that make the refrigerator cold. The freezer is actually inside. We also have, coming to this side of the kitchen, this universal wringer washer machine. This was also purchased in 1942. It came in just a few days difference of the refrigerator, and this is where Leela and Bradley would do their wash. It was in the kitchen. The kitchen was the easiest place to do the laundry, as it was the best place to fill and empty the wringer washer. So this is the 1950s kitchen of the Barnes Museum. Now, before I bring you into the summer kitchen, let's talk about this recipe, this loaf cake. And I'll show you this part of the kitchen. We have on the wall over here several diary entries that you'll see when you're able to come visit us at the Barnes Museum again. You're able to see many cards, black and white cards like this, that describe the comings and goings and the happenings of the house straight from the diaries. Now, these entries in particular are specifically related to recipes. And I love the recipes because the recipes look very similar to Sylvia's mince pie recipe right here. 1 part beef suey, 2 parts lean beef boiled tender, chopped fine, season. You read these directions, it really doesn't give 100% what the units of the ingredients are, and it doesn't give you a cook time. A lot of times the diary entries will say, "Cook till done. Mama was very successful today cooking," or "Mama wasn't very successful cooking today. That was a bad day in the Bradley household. Sylvia had burned some things." I don't think it happened very often. Most days the girls were describing their mother being very successful in the kitchen. But let's look at the recipe that we are going to recreate today. This is Sylvia Bradley's loaf cake. Now, folks, check out these ingredient units. We've got 4 pounds of flour, 3 pounds of sugar, 2 pounds of butter. This is a very healthy recipe. 2 pounds of raisins, 1 pound of citron, 1 ounce mace, 1 quart milk, 1/2 pint of yeast, 6 eggs, and it makes 8 loaves. So these ingredients are, quite large because, again, it is making 8 loaves. So the first thing we had to do to recreate this recipe is pare it down a little bit because I like to cook, but I thought experimenting with 8 loaves might be a bit much. So the first thing you need to do to convert a recipe down is figure out how many loaves you want to make. So we wanted to make 1 loaf, we divided that by the 8 loaf recipe, and we got a number of 0.125. We then multiplied, this is the history math lesson, folks. We then multiplied 0.125 by each of the ingredients, multiplied it by 4, multiplied it by 3 pounds, and we came up with 1/2 pound of flour, 0.6 pounds of this, 0.6 ounces of that. And then we converted that over to units that we are used to cooking with today. So here, and I'm going to post this down in, I'm going to post this on our website. I'm also going to post this on our social media page. But the recipe converted looks like this. We have 2 cups flour. This makes much more sense. 3/4 cup sugar, 1/2 cup of butter or 1 stick, 1/2 cup of raisins, 1/2 cup of citron, 1/4 teaspoon of mace, 1/2 cup of milk, and 2 tablespoons of yeast with 1 egg. Now, we have a few substitutions because I wanted to make sure that we could recreate this recipe with ingredients that we might have in our house today. So the flour was easy. So we have the 2 cups of flour right here. We have the 3/4 cups of sugar here. And we have the 1/2 cup of milk right here, the stick of butter, and the egg and the raisins, again, very easy. There's 2 different ways you can do the the citron rather, called for in the recipe. You can use real lemons and you can squeeze the juice fresh. It's always better with freshly squeezed ingredients. Or you can do what I did and you can take a little bit of lemon juice and you can use that in the recipe. Now, in my house, I also didn't have yeast readily available. So you can substitute yeast by giving equal parts of baking soda and lemon juice. Now, baking soda, folks, not baking powder. I made that mistake, so just forewarning, it's baking soda. What happens is instead of the 2 tablespoons of yeast, you would use 1 tablespoon of baking, again, soda, and 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. This is a little less than that, but I just want to show you what happens when we add the lemon juice to the baking soda. We get this great little science experiment going on here. This is going, and we're going to stir this around until it makes a nice little paste. This is the substitute for yeast. So in the recipe, if you don't have yeast, you can create this great little paste right here and put that right into your recipe. How I started my recipe yesterday was I took and again, I'm going to have the directions for you. And posted, but I took a large bowl and I creamed together the softened stick of butter with the 3/4 cup of sugar. Now, what I mean by cream is I made the butter a little soft and put it right in the bowl, poured the sugar over it, and took a fork and just kind of blended it together until it made a nice buttery, sugary paste. And then what I did was I added the yeast substitute to it. So I added this fun little paste to the paste that I had made. I then put in the egg and mixed well. Now, again, the recipe calls for mace, and here's where we can add another little substitute. I did not have mace readily available in my house, but I did have nutmeg. Nutmeg and mace are from the same family, in fact, similar to the same plant, so you can use nutmeg and as a substitution for the recipe. If you're like me and you like sweets and a little bit more candy type flavor to it, go ahead and use a 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon instead of the nutmeg. It'll be super sweet when you do that as well. It gives it a great flavor. So again, instead of a 1/4 teaspoon of mace, feel free to use nutmeg or cinnamon. I then added the flour. 2 cups of flour are called for in the recipe. When I bake, what I like to do is put 1 cup of flour in at a time, mix it around. It makes life a little easier and creates way less of a mess on my counter as I stir and flour starts to go everywhere in my kitchen. And once that's all mixed together very well, I add the last 3 ingredients. I add the 1/2 cup of milk, the called for lemon juice or the citron, and I add the raisins. Now again, if we're looking for a fun substitute, folks, I have raisins here today, but feel free, go ahead and put some chocolate chips in that. I mean, come on, what's not better with chocolate chips, right? So you can have cinnamon and chocolate chips, or you can add these raisins right in. When we did this recipe, we did use the nutmeg and the raisins to stay as true as possible to the ingredients. Now, if we look on the directions that, again, I'm going to post, it says preheat the oven to 350 degrees. Now, here's where Sylvia would have had a little bit of a problem. Her ovens did not preheat to anything. She was using a wood burning stove, and then later in the 1800s, a gas burning cast iron stove. And cooking, that's why she was successful sometimes, and she wasn't successful at other times. Not having a set time, or a set temperature rather, on your stove is quite difficult. You really, really need to watch it. Because Sylvia's recipe did not call for a cook time, I kind of felt like Sylvia yesterday working on this recipe. I kept watching it. After about 30 minutes, I figured that this was similar to a pumpkin bread or a zucchini bread or a banana bread. So I cooked it for about 30-35 minutes, and then I started watching it like a hawk, figuring out exactly how long it needed. My stove at home worked for about an hour. Now, that was the first loaf that I made. The very first experiment was just 1 loaf. Was very successful experiment. I felt, again, just like Sylvia. And it did take about 60 to 65 minutes to cook that 1 loaf. The second experiment I tried with the loaves, I doubled the recipe, and that changed the cook time a little bit. I'm not sure if it was a difference in the substitution in the rising of the yeast that I had placed in, but for whatever the reason, the hours seemed to be a little too long for the loaves, and I'm going to be able to show you the loaf on the end. So you would mix this all together, and then at the very end, you would take just a typical loaf pan. Feel free to use a glass one, a cast iron one if you have it at home, certainly similar to what Sylvia would have used, or these beautiful tinfoil disposable ones. This is great. Patty, you're 100% right. That bread would go very nicely with a hot cup of coffee. In fact, I have saved my breakfast this morning. I've not eaten yet, and I'm going to go home and have a piece of this with my cup of coffee, so that's a great idea. So again, this is the recipe, and you would cook until done if you preheated your oven at 350. Really start watching it after 45 minutes and cook till your stove works for about an hour. It should not take longer than an hour. Now, let me show you where Sylvia would have cooked. This portion of the house that I'm standing in right now is an addition, the addition that was put on in 1865. And although this kitchen would have been here, it's not necessarily where Sylvia would have spent the vast majority of her time cooking. Again, in 1836, this wasn't here, but the summer kitchen was. Now we're going to walk through a little walkway, a breezeway that connects this kitchen to the summer kitchen. This breezeway is not original to the summer kitchen. The family never would have wanted to connect the summer kitchen to the main house. Eamon Bradley, we've been talking about him for a few weeks now. Eamon Bradley was a volunteer firefighter here in town, and he was mortifyingly afraid that if the summer kitchen or the barn were to go up in flames, that it could take the house. So he took measures to make sure that didn't happen. The summer kitchen was far enough away from the house that if it did go up in smoke, it wouldn't necessarily catch the house. And even the barn, he moved the barn from its original location to the location you see all the way in the back now in late April of 1874. And you know what it did, folks? It snowed in late April of 1874. Just like it sleeted and hailed in May the other day. In 1874, that last week, they were in the process of moving that two-story barn and it snowed on them. So again, we're going to walk through this breezeway right now and into the summer kitchen, but this would not have been original. When you come to the museum, sometimes the summer kitchen is a seasonal room to exhibit, and the reason why that is because it is not insulated very well. Again, 1836 construction, and just walking through that doorway, I feel the drastic temperature change. All of these artifacts that we have are original to the family. I couldn't stress this enough. The Barnes Museum is so incredibly unique. The artifacts that we have are all original to the family. Nothing is period or is needed to be brought in. In fact, this beautiful spinning wheel that I'm showing off right now is from Sylvia Barnes's family, and this dates to the 1700s. We have, in the back corner, a brick bread oven over here behind that little hatchway door there. And here we have, folks, this is what Sylvia Bradley herself would have been cooking on. This is her new process, 1883 cast iron gas stove. Very beautiful piece. And the family, if you can believe this, after the 1865 edition was put on the house, they would have cooked, or they would have used this year round, but they moved this stove twice a year. They would keep it in the summer kitchen during the warmer months of the year because they didn't need the extra heat going into the rest of the house. We didn't have air conditioning and central heating way back when, so they didn't need the extra heat in the summer months, making things warmer. But in the winter months, they would literally pick this up, move it, and put it where that white Glenwood range is now. You see behind the stove, we have this little painted brick area. Now, if I were to remove all these artifacts right here and pick up that white wooden circle, we would see almost like a set pot or a cauldron underneath there. This is where the family would do their laundry, and the artifacts on top of this are the laundry soaps that they would use. The booklet that we have right here says what a cake of soap will do. We have how to make soap and recipes for that as well. So this is where they would have been doing their laundry until that universal wringer washer machine came in 1942. Leela wrote about it in her diary that she got it. I'm certainly sure she was happy to not have to cook out here. You see right here as well, we have Upson Brothers, Southington, Connecticut. The Upsons were, again, Leela's family, the last woman of the house, and the Upson Brothers Grocery is a very familiar stopping place in Southington now. It used to be where Oxley's drugstore used to be, and now where the Pepper Pot and the bank are over here. So very unique items. So she would have been cooking in this summer kitchen. She would have been doing laundry. She would have been drying. She would have been canning. Grandma Sylvia, folks, even brewed her own beer. So she would have they were making candles, they were making soap, they were spending a lot of time in the kitchen. The kitchen brought this house to life. So even bringing ingredients into the house, of course, we don't cook on these stoves today for safety of the artifacts and safety of the homestead, but we certainly enjoy pretending and even bringing these items in to pretend to cook because it does feel that we bring the house to life. So here's where, drum roll please everyone, we are going to open up the new process. That is my loaf cake. We're going to take it out just like Sylvia would have, except she would have used hot pans. This, again, I made yesterday. Here's my loaf cake, folks. Again, the cook time was a little off. These were darker than my first experiment, and they did not rise in the same way. So again, doubling the recipe, I'm not sure if the yeast substitute worked very well for that, but I have, this is the wonderful loaf cake right here. And we are going to attempt to do this one-handed and cut into it. You know what? Maybe we can go like this and put the phone right here in front of everything. trials of live Facebook being only having 2 hands. We're going to cut right into this loaf cake here. It seems moist. Again, the one yesterday was fantastic. We had a great time eating that at the house. And I'm just going to cut this little piece. See if I can get it out without making an extreme mess. So it's just bread and cake just like this. Again, it's not quite a bread, and it's not quite a cake. Like if you were to make a lemon loaf cake, very thick, very dense. This is dense, but it has a little bit more of that pumpkin bread sort of a consistency to it, a zucchini bread, a banana bread. All right, folks, here we go. We're gonna try it. It tastes just as good as yesterday. This is wonderful. I hope that you try these recipes at home. I'm going to post the loaf cake. If you have fun making it, please send us pictures and videos. You can email us at thebarnesmuseum@southington.org or post it right in the comments for us. If you make any substitutions or have any fun ideas of how to make this better, let us know too. Experiment with it. Have fun. The great part of history is that when you have documentation, like we do here at the museum, we're able to create and recreate items that the family was doing. This is literally recreating history, and I'm having a great time tasting it. So thank you so much for watching and enjoying What Is It Wednesday. Have fun cooking. I'm gonna go get my coffee now. Bye everyone.